Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast with your industry veteran hosts, Chris Tetzel. This podcast starts now.
Welcome to another Peers Over Beers. My name is Chris Tetzel, and today I have another special guest, Elizabeth Kinsey from Slack. She's a manager of community, and if you haven't heard of her, which is probably unbelievable, here she is. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
For sure. Excited to be here.
Yeah. You seem nervous. Are you nervous?
I'm not. I've just got a donut, so I'm very excited about that. So
yeah, right before we started, she goes, "Can I get my donut?" I've been just kind of really wanting this donut. Oh my gosh. So, well, Elizabeth, I just want, we haven't met officially. Now, I think I was telling you earlier that I've seen you speak 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4, I don't remember, but at a CMX conference, and I was telling you how good you are and everything else. And I've been kind of following you, and, you've really started to build something over at Slack, a great community, a team of community. Can you talk a little bit about, you first, and then kind of the community stuff, I guess? Let's get to know you as a person. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you that the reason that I have a donut is because I went on an extra long bike ride today. And,
all right.
So I go on a bike ride pretty much every morning, and there's a bakery that is sort of drifts all of the spells over. And over the last 3 days, they've been baking cinnamon rolls or something with cinnamon. So I've just been going like every day. So today I finally broke down. I was like, you know what? Extra long bike ride, gonna treat myself to some donuts. So I'm a big fan of donuts. But you're right. I've been at Slack for a while now, and I think I remember the talk that you mentioned at CMX. I think I was talking about how to operationalize some stuff in your community and what to think about. But I've been at Slack for a little over 3 years and have been focused on community the entire time. Really started out focusing on Slack developers. Came to Slack because I'm a big fan of Slack.
Who is it?
Right? A couple people. I mean, if you look on TikTok, there's definitely some folks that are like, why? But
okay, well, fair enough, but who cares?
That's I'm old. I don't go on TikTok. So,
but hey, that's a social platform that has really taken off over the last year, 2 years. I mean, it's crazy.
It really has. It's amazing. But yeah, I've been in community for, I would say, like officially 8 or 9 years, but definitely community aspects of my jobs before that. Before I was at Slack, I was at a company called Branch. They build mobile attribution tools. So I worked with app developers and mobile product managers and helped to found that and build that community out. And then came to Slack to work with Slack developers and then have built that program out and the team out over the last 3.5 years or so.
Yeah. So to go back to the donut conversation, I love donuts too. I don't eat as much. I'm a big runner, but definitely after a nice workout, it's good to get a nice little donut or, some pastry that you've been really wanting, especially when you go past the bakery. Is that where you got it, I assume?
No, so the bakery is like a commercial bakery that's down. And so it's like down in the industrial part of town where the trail. So I live in the Bay Area. So there's the Bay Trail, and it kind of goes around this industrial area. And there's like a chip factory, and there's a hummus factory. So there's always smells to drive you crazy in the morning while you're, sweating.
But that's when you get the hungriest, right? Like,
yes. It's like, I didn't, who knew? But so I didn't get the donuts from there. I got them from one of our favorite donut places,
cool.
Which is like an old mom and pop shop. And they have these ridiculously gigantic glazed donuts. They're like the size of my head. I'm not even kidding. The first time I went in there, I was like, that is not real. They're like, oh no, it is. Yeah, here you go. Like, that's
here. Do you want one?
Yeah. I need a forklift to carry this home. It is not, even though it's light and fluffy, it's still giant. So
I love glazed donuts. Actually, my favorite. I do like jelly donuts too, but sometimes they're just a little messy. But interesting enough, like I was talking to you earlier a little bit about, you guys just went with another platform, to run your community. and not specifically Slack to do community, which maybe you guys were doing a little bit of that before. But can you talk more about that? I'm highly interested because, and the reason is, you hear, let's say leaders come in and they want to hire a community manager. Why don't we just use Slack as our community first? And then, and I'm not saying you can't do that. I mean, that is an opportunity, but I'm interested to kind of hear your thought about that.
Yeah. So let me give a little bit of context. So we have we our main community program for the last 2.5, 3 years roughly has been a user-led program. So your typical kind of volunteer-led meetup program obviously has been virtual for the last 2 years. But that's what we launched with. And aside with that, on the digital side, we were using Slack and we'll continue to use a Slack workspace. And so that is both for our community members and our community leaders. What we started to explore was, Slack is a really good tool for building the relationship aspect of community. I think that it is an amazing tool for business because that's really what it's built for. And you can adapt it for community purposes, but there's always going to be things that it doesn't have and probably won't ever have because it's not built for that, right?
Yeah.
So when we started kind of talking to members about what brings you into the workspace, what do you want to see from the community? Some of the power users and some of the top contributors that I was talking with were, they're like, well, one of the things is that I feel like sometimes I answer the same question over and over and over again, because whether this was, on the developer side or on the end user side, people, it's a feed, a channel is a feed, it moves. It's not something that's static. And so a lot of people don't scroll up. And when you get enough volume in a channel and in a community, it's too much to scroll up. And I find myself, I'm in a bunch of different workspaces for Slack community. I mean, we're in a couple together and I'm, there's a bunch of them for community managers and you should go join them all. They're fantastic, but it has limitations. And so that was one of the things that users said. So how can we solve that? Well, we're not going to solve that with Slack, the product. There's a lot of things that we could do to make that work, but the overhead of trying to manage that amount of information in like a pinned post or a bookmark, it just doesn't make sense. So started looking at other tools and we spent a lot of time looking at this. So it took about 2 years before we decided to we started looking at this around the same time that we launched the user group program. And the other things are kind of traditional community forum type stuff. Like if someone goes and puts into Google and searches a question about Slack and it's all in a Slack workspace, nobody's going to be able to find that great, amazing person's content and contribution to the Slack ecosystem. Like no one's going to be able to plug into that. You'll find our help desk articles and research, the resource library and blogs, and all that's really great. But sometimes you want to know how someone in the real world is practically applying the information in that blog. It's great that we've told you how to do something, but if I am sitting at my desk in my house, away from my peers, because we're all working at home, and I'm like, okay, I get the concept of this, but I would love to talk to someone who actually has applied this concept to a problem. How do you, making those connections? So that discoverability aspect is super important. And that's just not what Slack is built for. I mean, you want your company communication not to be Googleable. So that's, it's a business tool. And I think that that's really what it really comes down to is Slack can absolutely be adopted for community. And I think there's a lot of communities out there that use it really well. But for us, for this sort of longer term, bigger scale, we needed something that was going to be a public forum that was a little bit more on the traditional side. Plus, you want to be able to reward and uncover your best users. And there's definitely good analytics tools in Slack for business cases, but maybe not for like, hey, is this person actually answering questions in a helpful way? Are they active? Like there was a lot of that kind of stuff that we couldn't see in Slack. Now we still have a Slack workspace where the forum is growing. The thing that we did that I think really bridges the gap is we built an app, a Slack app for the community that plugs into the community.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, and this is actually available to any Slack user. So if you use Slack and you want to be able to plug into Slack community, sign up for Slack community and at forums.slackcommunity.com, link your account with the app. It has to be approved and installed on your workspace, obviously. But then you can see all the stuff that you're following. You can reply to questions. You can see when you get tagged in things. You can follow people and topics, and we'll continue to develop the app so that it is much more bi-directional. So if you want to be in Slack and participate in community, you can. But we also want to be able to give that wider access to people, that entry point before, bringing folks into a workspace. The other thing is, and I'll pause because this is a lot of me talking. Imagine yourself as a brand new Slack user. And like, this is very specific to Slack because we would be using our product for our community. So you have just been told we're using Slack at work and you don't know anything about it and you have to learn it. And you go and you join this community and there are 10,000 people in a channel.
Yeah.
How intimidating is that to like ask a question? And that's feedback that I got from folks that that I was like, hey, you just joined the workspace, what are you here for? And they're like, well, yeah, I had a question, but like, wasn't really sure where to go to ask it. And like, when I did figure it out, I was like, there are a lot of people in here. And I didn't feel comfortable asking it. So I kind of saw people that were DMing or that like had answered similar questions or like, and I asked someone, and then that's the other thing. A lot of times what ends up happening in a workspace, and I bet this happens for you at work too, is because I know it does for me. Once you find an expert in a workspace, right, like you stop asking in channel. Yeah. You have DMs. And so one of the things that I talk with folks who do run communities on Slack is, it's okay if you have a high rate of DMs, because that means that the people in your community are making connections and they are happy to talk to each other.
Absolutely.
They just don't want to do it in a public channel, or that's not the behavior that they are used to. So that also means that all of that like amazing knowledge is not making it out into the world. So yeah. Anyway, so there was a lot that went into thinking about like, why do we want to do this? What's the benefit for our users? And then also, how can we make this the best kind of educational lever and peer-to-peer kind of exchange of information. And we got a lot more stuff planned for the forum. And then the other part of it is, we're required by Salesforce and they have an amazing online community.
That's right.
And so where can all the trailblazers go, especially if they're just learning again about Slack?
Well, it's a huge opportunity for you guys too, right? To plug into potentially.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. I think that, if you're going to get acquired by a company that has big community energy and like, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, for you, it's going to be really exciting on that end, I would think. So do you have so I have a question about the app thing, but before I ask that question, keep me honest. I want to make sure that I ask about how are you gold? Like, what are you tracking? You have to tell me the numbers, but just kind of, so just keep me honest on that one. But so I want to go back to the app thing. So it sounds like you've got an app that it's kind of a Slack thing that does it push that discussions over into the forums? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it does a couple of things. So if you don't link your account, if you just install the app, you can search the forum directly from Slack. So you would go to the Slack community app. They're in the app home, which is like that landing page inside of Slack that you have with a DM with an app. There's a couple of buttons. You can click search. You can plug your search in there. You can search groups. You can search topics, discussions, and then it'll show up in Slack. And you can go from Slack, you can either choose to go directly to the post. And then if you were logged in, you could also reply to the post. So say that you found a question that is similar to yours and you like see the answer, but you still have a follow-up but you don't want to like have to go back into Slack. You could just reply directly from Slack. It opens up a little modal and it'll plug it to a thread on the forum. The other thing that it does, if you are logged in, if you've connected your account, so you can get notifications. So if you're following specific topics, you can click a button that's just the, my followed topics, and it'll show all the most recent discussions in those topics. Same thing for groups. And so the group discussions as well. And then you can also get notifications when your app mentioned in the community. If someone replies to your question, if they, choose your answer as the best answer. So all the notifications that you could get by email instead in Slack, because these are Slack users, they probably don't live in their email. And so
that's right.
And then I think the big thing though is that you can reply back. And like in a future version of the app, what we would like to have is if you could ask a question in any Slack workspace, like say you're either in the community workspace or you're in your own workspace, and maybe you have like a Slack help channel with your IT team, and you have this app. You could, click on the message overflow action, which is the little 3 dots, and say, send this to the community to ask this question and tag it with some topics. Now, that's not what it does right now, but that is one of the things that we want to build out. And the really cool thing is that we are using a Salesforce product. So there is,
awesome.
So since we're using Salesforce and we're with Salesforce, we're really able to kind of connect a lot of those dots and see what I think is cool from a product perspective, because I'm also like a big product nerd, is that we're using the platform. So like if you are a Slack user and you come into any workspace, or even if you come into our workspace and you're using this app, you're seeing what the power of the platform is without really even knowing that that's what we're doing. And here are 2 systems that are disparate, that are talking to each other. And Slack is this layer of communication. You're not going to do deep work in those, in that layer. You're going to, if you need to go do, write a big, huge, lengthy reply, or you want to add a bunch of images for screenshots or whatever, you're going to go back to the community and do that. But you can do that light layer of work, and it really exemplifies the way that you can plug systems in together and use Slack as that layer. So, which I think is super cool from a product perspective.
Yeah, I assume you guys are going to do some awesome things, especially with Salesforce now. And, it's just kind of a key thing of, especially product companies use Salesforce and Slack all around the world, everywhere. And even, some of these old school companies are starting to use Slack and sometimes Salesforce, right? So, I mean, it's just, the opportunity is big for you guys.
Well, and so not to like continue to harp on this, but like, it's not even just the Salesforce tools, because Salesforce has a huge ecosystem. So it's also Tableau. They have an amazing app. And folks that are using Tableau, how do you use Tableau and Slack together? How do you build these really cool reports about your data and send them directly into Slack, and your whole team has access to it? Like, that's amazing to me. MuleSoft, like the things that you can do, you're using a ton of APIs. That's what, MuleSoft does. So like if you're a developer and you're also in Slack, you're probably building things with all of these tools. So it's not just the CRM, there's this whole ecosystem within Salesforce.
Yeah, it's a good point. And the opportunity is even greater than just Salesforce, and just where do you start? That's kind of what they had to figure out. But opportunities.
Well, luckily for me, I get to focus on the Slack folks, because that's for you. I mean, everybody else's.
But Tableau has a community, right? Like, and so that Tableau. I don't. Do you, out of curiosity, talk to these other community leaders there?
Yeah, okay. We do. Actually, we chat. It's kind of fun because, these are all folks that are in the community world. The community world is small. So like people know each other. So like I was friends like with Jessica Langston, who runs, Trailblazers. Like we've known each other for years. And so, we used to, when we were in person, our offices, the Slack office and the Salesforce tower are virtually across the street from each other. We would get lunch. And so now we get to work together. That's so, so we meet once a month, and we kind of talk about what's everybody doing. And it's really awesome to be able to connect. So, just like that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you already had a connection, but it makes it even that much interesting and greater, because now you're one company in a sense. I mean, maybe not one company, but you know what I mean? Like and so to have that kind of relationship has got to be really helpful,
it is.
You can get some inside scoops if you wanted, if she has any.
I don't think that they let us do that, but
Fair enough. So something I wanted to go, and all this stuff that you've been talking about, it's been great because I think, people getting to know you a little bit and, what you guys are trying to accomplish, what you're doing, the app thing sounds, but people are always in the app, and the opportunity to, you building an app. Is it a native app, by the way? Or is it?
It is. Yeah. It's all native to Slack.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, that's where people are. You get people on their phones and the push notifications and everything else. I mean, look, I use Slack all the time, like you said, even in the community place, and just at work and everything else. It's all on my phone. I don't have to be on my computer to do anything. So I think that's phenomenal, and a huge kind of stickiness that, engagement piece, part of the strategy. That's just, if we did that, with communities today, and that's the way I try to push platforms to say, look, you need an app, but the app needs to be easy to use. You know what I mean? And it needs to say, like, I use this one company. I think everybody knows I use HireLogic, and they have an app. They just built it. But today it's not easy to use. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, you have to go type in connected community on the Apple store, and then you got to put in community.reltio.com, and then you got to do some other shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, okay, nobody's going to do this.
Yeah.
So, like, and then it never says Reltio community, let's brand it, so I think the platforms, community platforms themselves have a little bit ways to go on that piece, but I think it's a huge opportunity. And I'm not, like, I love HireLogic and I love using their platform and everything else, but just like all of them, innovation is not a big thing for any of them. It seems like to me, like, it's a very frustrating market in that, and what Slack's doing is cool as hell. Like, I love it. I mean, you guys are, to me, using Slack is a cool thing. Don't get me wrong, getting all these notifications is annoying sometimes, but I mean, but it's real time, real live, and so there's a huge engagement piece to Slack, in itself, and then pushing that stuff from the app into the community itself is, sounds like a big opportunity.
Yeah, I think so.
How do you track, okay, so there's a big loaded question. So let me try to narrow it down as best I can. So you have the app, and, there's got to be some engagement things that you track, downloads maybe you track or whatever. So that's one. And then two is, what's the most important KPIs from a community standpoint to you guys?
Yeah. So I think right now, because we are still in the Slack has been around for 8 years. The community has been around for 3. So it'll, it's still relatively young, and especially the forum, it just launched, and the app just launched in November. So we are still super, super early. And so
that's fair.
So the things that matter right now are probably not the things that are going to be as important, say, in a year. Right. So right now, early days, what we're looking at is, what does growth look like? What does return rate look like? Are people contributing? Are people asking questions and answering questions? What is are people logging in? What does that look like? What does that monthly active usage look like? What does the conversion look like from people that are finding the community and actually joining? What can we do there to improve that experience? So a lot of looking at what is the function right now? How are people finding us? How can we improve that? How can we improve their experience when they get there? What's that conversion rate? Are they coming back? And then also the quality, like, are they finding what they're looking for? So that's it really on the forum. Like, those are the early kind of numbers. The thing that we look at community overall, and the hypothesis that we have that we're still, figuring out how to measure, but I do think it's true, is, if someone is part of the community, ostensibly they should be a better Slack user, whatever that better Slack user means, right? Are they using channels? Do they know how to use app mentions? So there's like levels of product sophistication that if you are part of the community, you should ostensibly either that should help accelerate your journey to be a sophisticated user, or the people that are part of the community, you would, ideally look at a control group and say, these folks who join the community are more up to speed than these folks who are not, because they are getting the help and the answers that they need. that's the ideal world that you want to come to. I think that that's,
Of course.
that's really what we're going for. Are we measuring it perfectly right now? No, but when we get
Who
there,
is?
I'm confident.
Yeah, of course. It's a journey, right? Like you just started
Exactly.
basically that piece of it, back in November.
Yeah.
And, executives have to be patient. You have to be patient. And, sometimes the organization isn't always ready for what you're ready for or what you think you're ready for. And so, that's got to be a Q4 thing or a Q3 thing as you're kind of building out your roadmap, right?
Yeah.
So you just got to be smart. And I think it sounds like there's a lot of things that you're trying to do. And one of the things that you mentioned was, we just want to make sure our users are using this piece of Slack and that piece. And the journey is that they get smarter about Slack and using the different features. It's called adoption, right? I believe that the more that somebody adopts the product, the bigger that renewal will be over time, the more that you will sell over time,
Yep.
whether it's licenses or, additional features and functionality, so if you get them really smart about it, you build programs to just get deep dives into, that product and you could look at usage on the certain product and say, well, this really isn't being used. Boom, let's have a webinar on that, or let's have a post on that. I don't know, whatever you guys do, to really get deeper into that. And then at some point, as you get smarter, and as I get smarter, over time, how can you then start tracking adoption / renewal rates, buying more, upsell, cross, all that kind of stuff, right? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of in my opinion, like the holy grail
Oh yeah.
to some degree. But
Yeah,
I believe,
especially for like this kind of community, for sure.
yeah, for you guys, I mean, I think that the nice thing about Slack is everybody's using it, right? And so they at least kind of know. And so it's not necessarily extremely hard to use. There's probably features that people aren't using that that you're trying to get them to use or adopt more and things like that, or try to sell, some new kind of thing, but we all are doing that same thing, like our product is just it's a great product, but it's just very let's say difficult. It's just complex, you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
it's a different audience.
Well, and I think there's layers. And what's really been interesting over the last year, we started out really focused on developers. And over the last year, we expanded the community. What we found were, people would come to the community and be like, I don't know what API means, but I would like to know how other people are doing X, Y, Z in Slack. And so we expanded out. So we're now, also end users and admins. And so there's a big variety of people. And so two things about that are really interesting. One is the level of complexity in the way that they're using Slack is different. An end user using Slack is definitely not going to have the level of complexity as someone who is trying to build a app or a workflow or an automation inside of Slack for their team, or someone who is trying to administer Slack and provision users and figure out etiquette and all of that stuff. So that's interesting because you have those different layers of complexity. But the other thing that is really interesting to me is you have almost this flywheel is such a popular term these days, but it almost is because look, the admins are setting up the environment, the workspace for all of their end users. They need tools to help to either plug into systems that they already have or build in workflows. Let's say a DevOps example where you're like an incident response. So you build a custom incident response for your team in Slack. Who uses that? It's the end users. The developer has to work with the admin on all the permissions that it's going to get, the channels it's going to live in, but they also have to understand how the end user is going to use that incident response tool that they built inside of Slack. So they all kind of inform each other and can learn from each other in the community, even though they're doing many different things and experiencing and using Slack in different ways. And that has been a really cool thing to see some of those conversations where happen or some of those relationships spawn because even though I can think of an example where it was like one conversation where someone was, more on the end user side, and they were asking a question about how do I use I can't remember if it was like Simple Poll or it was one of the polling apps. And one of the people who works for that app company that builds that app and that, they built a company out of building on Slack, responded in the community, and they had this great dialogue. Like, it was a couple of threads, a couple of exchanges about product usage. And like the guy who runs that community was like, hey, it was really interesting to hear your perspective, because we, wouldn't necessarily have like thought of that way to use the product. And so I don't remember I'm pretty sure it was a polling tool, but I can't remember which one. But it was a really interesting exchange to see, like, there's all these different audiences in the community, but the way that they intersect is really powerful in how
Absolutely.
they can like come away with ways that they can work, smarter, better, more productive, all that fun stuff that's in the taglines.
It's a great story, and I think storytelling is a big part of community. So great job.
So, thanks.
No, it is. I think
no, I agree. Yeah,
I think that if you can't tell that story of how the customer's engaging or partner, whoever is in your community, and the value there, then you're gonna have a hard time, because the goal at the end of the day to me is to one, making sure that your executives understand why you're doing community and what are the stories and how are customers engaging and interacting and how this is helping your organization, right? It's not just, hey, I'm dealing with customers and partners all day, that's great. No, you got at the end of the day show why you're doing this. And so I think that's where people think, God, this, that part of it's really difficult. So this has been really great. And something else that I was going to ask you, and I forgot. Anything else you want to kind of ask me, or any kind of thoughts, or
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was interesting. We were having a chat, it was Community Manager Appreciation Day this week, and we were chatting about that earlier. So would love to hear like what that was for you. Did you do anything? I mean, I saw, you made a really nice post on LinkedIn. But how was that for you this year?
I think I mentioned this before, is, Community Manager Day was not really, Appreciation Day wasn't like, I think I learned more about it like last year before. And I was like, Community Manager Day, I'm not really sure that it should be a thing or whatever. But over the last year or so, and then even when I talked to Nicole Saunders and Jenny Weigel, I mean, they both mentioned it. And, I started thinking about it. Like, I believe that one is, it's important for us to have a day, and as the amount of work that some of us do, and especially as one person team, or not even then. I mean, like, it's a tough job. When you think of, you've got to be a storyteller, you've got to talk to executives, you got to talk to individual contributors inside the company, you got to talk to customers, you got to build a content strategy, you got to build an engagement strategy, you got to do all this stuff.
You got to be a data analysis.
Yeah,
you got to do some marketing.
You got to
build out graphics.
Exactly. I do that shit every day. And so
like,
when you start thinking about the things that you have to sometimes pretend like you're a master of, and maybe you're not a master of certain things, but then you got to somewhat get good at it. I think too, you got to start being a master of how do you kind of dole that out, even if it's third-party companies to help you, write blogs or do videos and intros and outros. Even if you know how, you're not going to have time to do it at the end of the day. But anyways, so to say that, like, I have a new appreciation for Community Appreciation Day, and this year, what it meant to me was kind of looking back at all the things that I learned from Michael Sandoval. So, he was kind of the founder of Peers Over Beers, he and I, and what he taught me, and what, so I appreciate people like him that, that was one to teach. He was very much of a teacher. He was he wasn't necessarily a mentor at that time, but he then became a mentor, and then a peer, right? Like, and we talked about this stuff, and it was really to help others to get the most out of their community manager journey, if you will, leader journey, and also to dive into not just community management, into the digital space. We talk a lot about community management, but that's a big digital piece of, so it means a lot this year, and it will continue to mean a lot over the next few years, because I'll think about people like Michael, but I want to carry on that kind of thinking as, can, folks like Elizabeth and me and others help those and to get better at their jobs. Think of this, hopefully podcast is, learning and just shooting the shit sometimes, but some of the frustrations we have, or some of the, hey, we want to give you some advice or whatever. So I don't know if that answers the question, but to me, more so now than ever before. And maybe it's because of the circumstances, but it means a lot. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that that's, it's interesting because, the first time I heard about Community Manager Appreciation Day, I was like, what the, really? I thought it was made up. I was like, that can't be real. Like, and then similar to you, the first year I heard about it, I was like, kind of under the radar. I think the thing that has been cool to watch over the years is how the traction that it's gained.
Yeah.
And I think it's to your point that like community managers do a lot, even if you have a big team, or even if you're working with a lot of agencies, like you're still managing all those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's a very, you are, very integral to the success, and it takes a lot. And I do love that there is kind of this like, hey, step back and reward or acknowledge folks, because I think a lot of it can go unsung. I think a lot of the stuff that community managers do, and even, I think about when I talk to my execs, or when I talk to, even my team, like I know that whatever it is that they're showing and telling me that they're doing probably twice that, and I just don't see it. And so I love the idea that we stop, and they're always, to your point, and talking about Michael's legacy, like giving back, right? Like these are people that are constantly giving back and constantly buoying other people up and being that kind of heartbeat in many ways of the community. And so and they don't get, it's their job. So like, but to stop and say, hey, like we appreciate all of that you put in. I think it's I have come to appreciate Community Manager Appreciation Day over the years. So
say that twice
we
real
need
fast.
to have a date, an appreciation of Community Manager Appreciation Day. So maybe we can do that the day after, like Boxing Day. It could be like, but
I love it. And this has been really great, Elizabeth. And I really thank you for your time. And I like the idea of maybe next year we could do this kind of Community Manager Appreciation Day of a podcast every day, have certain, community managers on there, and just say, hey, what do you do? Tell us more. I don't know what it could be, but it could be kind of fun and make it a fun thing. But I really appreciate you coming on today.
I am
awesome.
so glad to be here. It was so fun to chat with you. Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, thank you again. And thanks everyone for listening to another Peers Over Beers. My name is Chris Detzel, and Elizabeth, thanks so much for coming.